Okay, we are live. Welcome to the first meeting of the Temporary Traffic Safety Committee for the town of Northborough. It is 6:03 p.m. on December 20th. I'm going to read the mandatory introductions for remote meetings, and then we'll proceed into the agenda. This open meeting of the Temporary Traffic Safety Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. An act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency signed into law on July 16, 2022. All members of the Temporary Traffic Safety Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Temporary Traffic Safety Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. I'm going to confirm member access by announcing your names, and if you can respond in the affirmative, we'll proceed into the agenda. Scott Charpentier, Public Works Director. Bill, are you here? Laura? Janine?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Mitch?
I'm here.
Jen?
Here.
And Chris?
Here.
Not only do we have a quorum, everyone is present. So the meeting's been called to order. We've done introductions. The first order of business is to elect officers. So there are three.
I'd like to nominate Laura Zeiton as chair.
Okay, we have Mitch Cohen nominating Laura Zeiton as a chair. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, Bill beat Janine to the punch, so Bill's got the second. Are there any other nominations for chair? Hearing none. Any deliberations on Laura as the chair? Okay, we will do a roll call vote for Laura Zeiton to be the chair of the Temporary Traffic Safety Committee. Mitch?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
It's all up to you, Laura. Your vote.
Aye, thank you.
All right, congratulations, Laura. You are the chair. Would you like me to proceed through the vice chair and clerk, or do you want to take it from here?
If you can, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, I will accept nominations on behalf of the chair, Laura, for vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Bill Pierce as vice chair.
Okay, Mitch has nominated Bill Pierce for vice chair. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, Laura Zeiton seconded the nomination. Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none. Any deliberations on Bill as the vice chair? Hearing none, we'll go through the vote. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mitch?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
And Laura? One more time, Laura?
Aye, yes.
There we go. All right, so Bill, congratulations, you're the vice chair. We have one more office to select, and it is the clerk. Do I hear a nomination for the clerk?
Are there any volunteers for clerk?
Sure, I will.
Great. I'll nominate Jen Scalise as clerk.
Okay, Mitch has nominated Jen as clerk. Do we hear a vice chair, a second for the nomination?
Second.
All right, Laura seconds. Are there any other nominations for clerk? I don't hear any. I didn't expect to hear any. What about any deliberation? And hearing none, we'll go for a vote for Jen to be the clerk. Bill?
Aye.
Laura?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Mitch?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
It's all up to you, Jen.
Aye.
There we go. All right, we have officers. We have Laura Zeiton as the chair, Bill Pierce as the vice chair, and Jen Scalise as the clerk. So the meeting is all yours, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you on this committee. I guess our goal tonight is to take a look at the agenda and work our way through it. So the next item that we have is a discussion of the charge for the Temporary Traffic and Safety Committee. Scott had shared some information. There was a spreadsheet, there were some links and some starting points for research as far as what we want to do to look ahead to this committee. So I was thinking we could talk a little bit more on those topics, figure out what we want to look at, and then just follow that conversation from there. So I'd love to open that conversation up. Is there a way that I should do that, Mitch?
If I can sort of, by way of introducing the Board of Selectmen initiative to create this committee, and I suspect all of you saw that discussion, certainly were part of the interview process, but for everyone's benefit as well as the public watching, the Board of Selectmen saw that there were some fantastic work done by the DPW and police and other departments responding to traffic and safety issues in the town, but there were some issues that were a little bit large and complicated where we regularly hear from citizens and residents of the town about various issues, certainly some more often than others. And we thought that maybe there were some issues that might be better dealt with by a public board having some involvement in that. And some of us did some research in terms of how other towns do that and found a very wide variety of traffic and safety and similarly named committees around the state, where there are many boards and committees that have standards, appropriations committee, zoning board, planning board, committees like that pretty much mirror each other with only minor variation. Where traffic and safety, there isn't a state law that says every town has it and this is what it looks like. So towns create it out of whole cloth. And so we thought it would be a good idea to first create a temporary committee to review the traffic and safety committees that we had access to in the Commonwealth and figure out of that what would work well for Northborough, and then present that back to the Board of Selectmen for a request to create a traffic and safety committee with a specific charge and set of responsibilities and membership, as well as the question was asked, well, what if at the end of this process we decide we really shouldn't have a traffic and safety committee? That's an option that we have before us. That once we do our review of the similar traffic and safety committees around, we may come to the conclusion that we actually don't want one for one reason or another, and then that can be our recommendation back to the board. My suspicion is none of you would volunteer if you actually didn't think we needed one, but that is an option open to us. And we've been given a charge of 6 months from our first meeting, which is now. So by 6 months, we have to have our report together, and then we would then present that to the Board of Selectmen for consideration for future action. I hope that's a reasonable introduction, Laura, and everyone.
Fabulous. Does anybody have any questions about what our goal is for this committee? So should I dive in now to start building out the list of what we want to evaluate from other towns? What would be a good way to kind of get this conversation started?
If I could make a suggestion that we, as individual future members and well before the formation of this committee, I think many of us had done some independent research, reaching out to different organizations or friends or colleagues in other towns and say, what do you have? What do you have? What do you have? And we kind of collected that data, and it's all in various formats, so emails that we got, things we found on websites and everything else, which is a great beginning to the analysis of that. So I think we all, at least some of us, sent that information to Scott. Some of it got echoed out to the full committee in advance of tonight. So I would suggest that we, rather than review the details of those, is think about the process that we want to take forward, that we don't necessarily have all of the answers from all of those committees. We have a mishmash of information from different towns. It may be worthwhile to do something like assign 2 or 3 towns out to different members, whether it be alphabetically or anything else, and say, okay, everyone do some more research and try to come up with some standardized way of collecting the data. So Laura or someone may volunteer to go ahead and say, all right, let's, here are a bunch of fields in a database, if you will, just, rows in a spreadsheet of questions to ask. And then we could go all out and sort of inquire to the towns that we've identified and look for more and try to get a standard set of information out as much as we can, and then come back and start to evaluate that with the eventual goal of picking out the things that might work well for our town. And that would take a little bit of time.
Scott, I think you had a question?
Thank you. I did reach out to a lot of communities a couple of years ago when the subject first came up. There is a wide range of traffic safety committees, compilations, and how they're made up. Some are staff only, some are staff and citizen, some are weighted more staff, more citizen, and vice versa. Some are only citizen with staff liaison. Picking the appropriate structure that for Northborough may be a good starting point as well. And then when we go off, when the committee goes off and starts looking at how it gets made up and what their charges are, you can maybe focus in on some communities that are comps, so to speak. A traffic safety committee comp is not necessarily a community between 12 and 18,000 residents in central Massachusetts with an open form of government, open town meeting government. It's more, it's 5 citizens, 3 staff, all voting, or 5 staff, 2 citizens, not staff voting. So that may be a good consideration as well while you embark on your research.
Yeah, I do have a coworker of mine who's on the Sherborne Traffic and Safety Committee that I got a ton of information from. I just got to find it somewhere buried on my computer at this point, and I can distribute that.
Phil?
Yeah, I think the spreadsheet that Scott put out is a really good start, where it gives us really a composition of what each committee is, as well as what their charge is. I think those 2 things are 2 important items that we need to look at. What is it that this committee is really going to do? I know from some of the information I got about Millbury that they were an advisory board for the Board of Selectmen as well as for the DPW. I don't know if that's really how Northborough would go, but looking at each one of those type of items. So I think to Scott's point, sort of coming up with our list of questions and what are we going to ask each town, and then like Mitch said, just break it up and we each take 2 or 3 and go off for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I guess that's sort of the other question is we need to come back to is how often are we going to meet, right? We only have 6 months to do this. So, does it make sense to do monthly? Do we need to do bi-weekly just so we, keep moving this along? I know from the planning board, and Mitch, I believe you're the Board of Selectmen as well. It's 2 times a month, right? For each of those. And that's how we sort of keep things moving. I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe that's even the first thing we need to do is figure out what our charge is and what our meeting cycle is.
Sure. The Board of Selectmen did not specify a meeting frequency or anything else. It's up to us to decide what to do. Obviously, we're having our first meeting just before the holidays, so I wouldn't expect we would either meet before New Year's or get a lot of work done before New Year's. So it may be worthwhile to think about, something this time of January to come back again, and even then think about how far we are. We may have some insight as to how much work we have left before us as far as the research. Conceptually in my mind, I'm thinking a couple of monthly meetings and then some more frequent meetings once we get into really the review and analysis and deliberations of them. But it may take some time to do the review and the research. But that's just me. I'm open myself to anything.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think the-
sorry if you're hearing my dog bark in the background.
And the other thing we have to do too is we have to keep in mind that, there's a limit on Zoom, there's a limit on, Scott's resources because he has other, we don't want Scott working 5 nights a week, right? As well as his day job. So, we need to be cognizant of that. Mitch has his, Board of Selectmen meetings. I have my planning board meetings. So, however we structure the meetings is going to be important to make sure everyone's available.
Well, that might be a good topic for us to revisit then and see what everybody else's availability is and what their thoughts are for days and times. Does that sound like a topic that we can, to open up to the rest of the team?
It may be worthwhile to pick, as Mitch indicated, a hard date in January, giving the committee a couple of weeks to research. And at that point, maybe pick some periodic dates that are open.
Perfect.
That may be a good approach.
So does
I agree
Tuesday
with
work
what
for
you-
everybody?
I agree, Mitch. I mean, maybe this time next month, getting us past the holidays and New Year's and, letting everybody in the different towns that we're assigned get back to work and be willing to sit and talk to us. I think that, maybe 4 weeks from now, I think would be a good timing. I know the Board of Selectmen meets on very specific days, the planning board. So, and Scott, you sit on other, you do other meetings. So I don't know if there's specific days, or evenings that you work.
Bill, are you, is the planning board meeting on the 17th, of January?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So maybe the 20th, the 24th, the night after your selectman meeting, Mitch, would be a good date. That gives us a couple of weeks in the beginning of January for you to get your research, get it over to me around the 17th, and then I can incorporate it into a concise document to redistribute before the meeting on the 24th.
Everyone available then?
That's good with me.
Jen, Mark?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm okay with 6 o'clock. I would have a slight preference for 7 o'clock.
Me as well.
Yeah, I think 7 o'clock might work a little bit better, but if that's not going to work for you, then 6 is good.
Whatever's best for the committee. 7 p.m. works well.
Janine and Mark, did you say 7's good?
Yep.
Yep, they're both good.
We have a next meeting. That's great. So now maybe we should think a little bit about, do we want to talk about the town distribution and where we want to gather information from, and then talk about the categories of information we'd like to gather?
Yeah, I would really like to see us make sure that we know which one of the town officials we need to be talking to and who would want to be on the committee, because I know that some of the committees in different towns are composed of different people within the town. And I'm not sure as far as who would want to be on the committee, because it doesn't sound like right now we have a specific charge of who should be on.
My suggestion would be to, I'm sorry, through the chair, my suggestion would be to reach out to either the administrative office or the public works office. The public works office will be involved in just about every single traffic safety committee you engage in. And if they're not available because there's a snowstorm or something, the administrative office will certainly be able to give you the composition and charge.
Yeah.
I think as part of our review of what other towns do, we'll see the type of staff involvement in those, and it's going to vary, and it would be, let's figure out what might work best from our perspective for the town of Northborough, and then obviously we'd want to consult the administrative office for confirmation of that before going to the selectmen. But I suspect there's going to be some reasonable consistency. Certainly, Public Works will play a very key role in our committee over the next 6 months, as well as any permanent traffic and safety committee.
I would think you'd want to. I'm sorry. I would think you want to know the composition, the charge, and the voting status. When I made the phone calls, there was several communities that had staff members voting, several that had staff members not voting, although attending. So PD, FD, DPW were there. They weren't voting. They were just professionals providing service to the committee. Other ones, they were actually voting members. Some they were the majority voting. So
Yeah, I think as we collect that data, that's important data to get. What is the makeup of the committee between staff and public voting? I'm curious how many of them are created by select boards or city councils versus in bylaws or charters. Might help us figure out how would we want to create ours. I'd be curious things like what type of data they get from departments. Do they get accident data from the police department or from the state or from some regional organization? There's going to be a lot we'll run across, and my sense is because there's so much inconsistency, just because there are no standards for this, it may take a couple of go rounds. We may all gather data and come together and say, oh, we got this exciting information from this one committee. We found out that, that they have a budget every year of $50,000 for consultants. I'm just making something up. And we may say, oh, that's a really good idea. Let's find out how many others have budgets. Maybe we ask for budget information even in the first round, but we'll come across new ideas like that as we get the data.
And Mitch, you make two good points. One being, how is this committee created? So in the event it's a bylaw generated committee, there will be a very specific charge outlined clearly in the bylaw. If it's something that's, I don't want to use the term adjunct inappropriately, but if it's an adjunct committee that doesn't have real authority or is not based on any bylaw or charter, that's a lot different. And when you do reach out to the communities, I believe it's important to find who is the appropriate liaison for us to communicate with for future questions. So Mitch's indication about follow-up has a point of contact that you can use to get additional information.
I'd also be curious if they are public meetings. So typically, if a board is made up of citizens, it would be a public meeting. If a board is made up primarily or exclusively of staff, it would not be public. And I'd be curious if it's a public board, are there videos of their meetings available online? Even if they're 2 years old from during COVID, it might be helpful to us to just even see how some of those meetings are conducted and some of the things they discuss.
I think these are all great areas to look at. I don't know if anybody's got any other thoughts for things that are really important that they'd like us to really gather in the researching phase of this committee. Is there anything?
I wonder if when we start pulling towns together, one of the things we should look at, one of the things we should identify is, do they have a major highway running through them? Right? Where Northborough has that, that's going to be important for, making sure that we identify something that's similar to Northborough when it comes to that.
I think that's a great point. And if you do find a committee when you're doing research that mirrors what Northborough looks like, that should probably be amplified in terms of, how we look at those results compared to towns. Maybe they're all like Northborough, but maybe they're not. But that's something good to mention just as you're envisioning it, how those would fit for our town. We have a good idea for what, for what our environment is like.
Yeah, and similarly, the population is going to play a key role where, the city of Boston may have a traffic and safety committee that looks like X, Y, and Z. Chances are it would be a very different format in budget and everything else than what something for Northborough would be like. But that doesn't mean we should completely ignore it. Maybe they have a neat idea that we can steal and craft for ourselves.
An idea about how to break this up, Laura. It's pretty simplistic, but there's 7 members. There is 26 letters. And I mean, literally I can, tomorrow divide it up, send an email out to the committee so everybody gets a few letters. That way, you're not all calling Westboro. You can call Bill, you can call Westboro and Wilbraham and Wellesley.
There are a lot of W towns.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's another way to do it that's quick and easy. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to do, I guess.
So I'm so sorry. You said 26 letters. I think I saw 16 on the town list, but are there others that aren't on the list?
Oh, yeah, just I'm trying to figure out how to break up the research,
Oh.
so not everybody calls, Southborough.
Oh,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
I know Chris had mentioned that he's got a friend, I think, with Sherborne. If there's people that have towns that they've got personal connections with, I would love it if we could match those people up. It might make more, more genuine information. Maybe that's not the right word, but other than that, I think distributing it that way would be great. Does anybody have any towns that, can we talk about the towns that folks would like to focus on?
Mitch, do you want D?
The D town you're thinking of, I don't think has one. So
Okay, all right.
the town where I used to live
I
in.
thought I'd throw it out there. I
At
don't
least
know.
at least when I lived there, did not have a traffic and safety
Okay.
committee. I would, yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't really matter how we divvy up as long as it's even. My worry with the alphabet is it may not end up being that even. There are no Z towns as far as I remember. And
I would eliminate a lot of them. and
but
try to-
there are a lot of R's and W's and
Yeah, with Mitch, you'll get W, R, and S.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, we could divvy it up that way. Laura, as chair, could just divvy it up and assign, or maybe if from the 16 or so towns that have already been identified, after this, we could just you could send an email to Laura and just say, I'd like this one, I'd like that one.
Yeah.
And after a few days, for any that have not been claimed, you could just assign them out evenly. And I think any of us could, as we find new ones, just go ahead and call them up, or maybe again work through Laura for just coordinating. If you find out that Tewksbury has a traffic and safety committee and it's not on our list, and I'm just making that up, if I found that out and I want to call them, I would send Laura a quick note like, hey, I've got Tewksbury. We do have to be very, very careful about the open meeting law and not deliberating. Something like that is administrative and is allowed. But I would not recommend going ahead and say, I saw Tewksbury, it looks fantastic, we should echo that, I'm going to call them. Don't do that.
I think
I appreciate that.
being a former resident of Tewksbury, I don't think that.
I didn't even remember that. So
I wonder if we could just put this into a Google Doc that has a password so that we could all have access to it. So it's not a matter of like putting it on you, Laura. We can just all go in and see what everybody's gathered. And we can have a note section.
That makes all the sense in the world, except for the open meeting law. It starts to get a little bit too risky to go ahead and see the comments that people put in from others. That I honestly, I wouldn't recommend that. It may make a lot of sense for Laura, or any subset, Laura, Bill, and Scott, to work together, for example, and come up with a Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet, as information gets sent in, and then disseminate that, share it as a read-only link out before the next committee. But all of us having editing capability for the same thing is it's frowned upon, because it is unto itself, it's not illegal, but it's too risky. Honestly, it's too risky. It's so easy to go over the line with that.
To echo Mitch, it would fall into the same concerns when it comes to public record requests as well, with that being a live document active amongst many desktops.
Thank you so much for that information.
I can tell you from working with the state that we did have Google Documents approved as a way to share files with committees.
Yeah,
So it is secure enough for the state.
It's not a question of security. The public records, I think, could work because it's a draft until it's published. The state isn't subject to the open meeting law.
Yeah,
but we are
different.
So that's more of my concern would be, I put in something like, again, I'll pick on Tewksbury. Hey, Tewksbury's looks great. Boom, that's deliberation by me. And
Can we
then
keep it
Jen
factual?
sees that, and Laura sees that, and Mark sees that. All of a sudden, that's a quorum. And we've broken the open meeting law.
Right.
Is it possible to keep it completely factual though? Like population and
I would,
I think it's too risky.
Yeah, I just think it's inappropriate. It makes all the sense in the world from a productivity standpoint. It really, really does. And it's more work on others to go ahead and compile the data. But
But understandably, we
Yeah, I
need
don't-
to.
yeah, I just don't think. we
Mitch,
should-
follow the rules, absolutely.
what I'm thinking, Laura, if it's okay, is maybe what we do is we come up with our list of questions, right?
Yeah.
And we put that as, here's what you send to whatever town contact you find, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if it makes sense, Mitch, because I have a town email that we just either CC my email or send the reply back. When they send a reply back, just forward it to my email, my town email, and then I can compile the list in an Excel that we can then share before the next meeting.
I hear Bill volunteering to do a lot of work. I'll take you up on that. Yeah, I don't
And I
think
think-
the email matters. I think, any of us should, contact and have conversations however we want to do the research. My sense is for myself, I'd be more likely to send someone an email of, let's set up a time and talk where I can ask some questions instead of having someone at the other end, fill in a spreadsheet. But do it however you want.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that way we have a central repository for everything to come in,
Yeah.
right? And then I can manage it at
Yeah.
that point.
I like the idea of maybe you could, once you and Laura and Scott or whoever, whatever subset wants to do it, figure out what the questions are to ask. So we have a standard set, and maybe create a spreadsheet or a Google Doc or something that could then get sent out to us individually, not to put it into the same place, but here's a template to use for the work that you're doing, so that we have exactly the same format. And then when we sent it back to you, Bill, for consolidation, hopefully you can just do a lot of copying and pasting.
Okay, I think we can do that. That makes sense.
And I think we've got a good list of questions. And then if there's other topics that come up as you're going, you can include that, in additional notes. And if it makes sense, we can edit and revise. I think this is going to be a good learning experience overall. So we'll try and create the guidelines for the questions that we want to ask, but be flexible from there if you find other good things that work. Yes, Scott?
So I'll be doing the minutes as part of the minute generation. I'll certainly be compiling this list in narrative form. I can very simply pull it into a spreadsheet that's easy to disseminate to the committee. Bill, you can be the repository of all the data, and it's as long as everybody in the committee sticks to the rows and columns, it should be a light lift for Bill to just copy from one Excel file to another. Bill, you get that to me for me to disseminate to the committee. Everything is clean and managed, I think, somewhat seamlessly.
Yeah, that's going to be the trick, right? I think our first go around has to be a very standard list of questions, right? Because they all have to be the same so that it makes it easier to compile the list from everybody going forward.
And my worry is I just don't want us to be limited to just those as people come up with ideas that, you may learn something from a committee and say, oh, this is something we should really ask. And that's why it may take a couple of go rounds, and that's okay. I also think, this list that we're creating might be very useful. I contacted the Mass Municipal Association, which is kind of like a Board of Selectmen trade group in the state, and they didn't have any master list of traffic and safety committees or how they were made up. So they did some research, which is, one of the emails that I sent out to this group. And, the end result might be useful to them or other organizations. So I have, having some standards and then building it out from there, I think will benefit Northborough and others.
I'm delighted to see how it's gonna, what the outcome of this is gonna be from a research perspective. And I think this is definitely something that's been, requested for quite a while from the town. So I'm grateful for all of you for being a part of the solution.
Maybe if I could suggest this through the chair, if
Yep.
everyone on the committee can provide their towns, I guess, outside of the existing list that they want to contact to Laura. Laura, if you compile all those into the list and get it to me.
Yep.
Hopefully we can get that done before the first of the year. It shouldn't be a lot of work. That way I can put together the spreadsheet for Bill and get it to him right after the holiday, and that gives everyone a solid 2 weeks in January to make a touch base with the other communities in preparation for our meeting on the 24th.
Yeah, if you're willing to take that on, Scott, I want to be very respectful of your time because you have a very, very important and busy job in the town and probably heading into your busiest season. So
Maybe this will keep the snow away.
all right. but feel free to push any of that back onto members of this committee as time warrants.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to go back really quickly too, because I think we dove like right in as we got started. I would love to understand just really quickly, like what's really important to each of you as we dive into this committee, just so we have an idea about what we can really focus on. So does anybody want to jump in and just say what their like important outcome is from this research? And if not, that's fine. I know we had introductions on the agenda, but I think we kind of bounced right past it very quickly. So I don't mean to put anybody on the spot either.
I mean, I can jump in. When I first thought of this, I just kind of, you see some things around town, and that, the police do an outstanding job, keeping the town safe, and Scott does an outstanding job keeping this town safe as well. But just taking some of the pressure off of them, and as residents, we see this stuff every day. We're out walking, running, driving around, whatever it may be. We have families of our own, and just kind of taking that stuff, bringing it to a higher attention, how to keep those things safe and protect us and our families within the town.
So I can say that, doing some research and listening to a lot of being involved in the whole traffic and safety thing for the last few years, and speaking to a lot of people, I think that what I would like to see come out of this is a clear picture for the residents of where to go for concerns. I think that what happens is, you hear and, you see things on Facebook, you see things on social media, you're listening to people talk. And I think sometimes people just don't know where to go with their concerns. And I'm hoping that this will be, a very concise and open line of communication for people to go to where they can be heard and hopefully maybe get a resolution or even just an explanation as to why things are the way that they are. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm sure that, the residents would be happy with one central location to go if they have some kind of concern.
I think one of the things I found this year when in running for the planning board was how many people are affected by traffic and some of the issues that are around town, right? A lot of people, some people weren't aware of it at all, but a lot of people made that comment to myself as I was, walking around just talking with people that, that was one of their primary concerns about the town of Northborough was, the traffic issues and, just safety of being able to walk around. So that was what prompted me to really, step this up when the opportunity presented itself.
Jen or Mark?
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. I've lived in Northborough a long time. I've seen a lot of these issues that you hear people complaining about on the traffic for my whole life. So I've seen different intersections done, I think 4 different times, and we're talking about redoing them again. So I want to make sure I can capture the past a bit and what's worked out, and and some of the improvements we've made have not been improvements, and sometimes going back is the best answer. So I also when I'm looking at the other towns, I want to see what towns have success versus what system they're using. I want to capture that. As I've said, I have too much time on my hands, so I'm looking for something to do. So,
Mark, I love the idea of not going backward because I think that there's some things in this town that have been done and maybe not captured everyone in town's hope for that project. I, in doing some research, think that having a planning board and watching the town kind of try to expand and some of the things that are hopefully happening in this town, I think that it goes hand in hand having a traffic and safety committee, because you want those issues to always stay at the forefront, and having people volunteer time to kind of keep those issues moving and be able to catch that extra bit of work that would normally fall, such as on Scott's plate. Volunteers can do that. We as a committee can do that if that will move us forward. And I think we'll be able to really actually bring a lot of the committees together and a lot of the different parties to make sure that the police are having a voice with the DPW, with the public, and we're hearing everybody's point of view. I think that's really important. I don't know that everyone has is hearing the same things. So to be able to have a central place to voice those concerns and put them all together and work together for solutions seems like a good use of time.
I think you raised your hands.
Yeah, real quick, I got a couple of things. First, I'm happy that everybody's getting together to do this, and it certainly sounds like everybody is pulling the plow in the same direction, which is great. I mean, that's not always easy for a committee that gets together on day one to see the same direction and all go that way. So thank you for that. And this is not necessarily a semantic issue. It's a little more than that. It's a traffic safety committee, not traffic and safety. Throwing the term "and" in there implies there are other safety measures and concerns that may be under the purview of this committee. So it's just so everyone is aware, it's a traffic safety committee, because we have other safety stuff that's well outside of the purview of our roadways and byways and pedestrians and cyclists. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the clarification. Mitch, did you have anything you wanted to share? I think.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on something that Janine said. My internet connection is unstable, so I apologize if I'm breaking up or frozen. Before I joined the board, I regularly heard comments like, "Oh, I'm not going to bother telling anybody about this particular, a traffic safety concern," because the perception was it just went into a black box and was ignored. After joining the board, I realized that's not actually true, that we do have very good staff that really does listen and does give careful consideration to a lot of these issues. But my hope is, but I know that now I understand as an incorrect perception that people don't care can be corrected by having a wider public discussion of these things, and then getting more feedback from the community and more input and more suggestions that would be on the weight of not this group, but any permanent traffic safety committee to work on with staff, and hopefully get a lot more community involvement with the decision making. And sometimes just being heard is very, very powerful to a community. And I think at minimal, a permanent committee can help with that. And I think, work on crafting larger, more complicated solutions to larger, more complicated issues in conjunction with our town staff that deal with traffic safety issues.
Yeah, I think with, between the downtown revitalization study and the incoming complete streets prioritization plan, there's a lot of good things coming down the pipeline that hopefully we can kind of, as a town, help out with and get that stuff going. There's a lot of good things out there, and the complete street stuff and just all that contributing to the traffic safety, whether that's adding sidewalk or any type of road diet that is out there, is always important.
Well, this is really great feedback, and I thank you guys for sharing all of this. It's just good to have that joint passion and just to really understand, what's driving everybody. So thank you. Is there anything else? I've been working through the agenda as far as the topics that we needed to cover. I think we have a good idea of the topics we want to discuss when we're interviewing the other towns. We've got a great list of towns that we'd like to conduct that research with. I'm going to work in conjunction with Scott, laying that list out. Anybody that's got particularly, interest in towns that they want to focus on for research are going to send me a note. We'll make sure that we get that whole list, distributed to the folks on this committee. And then we will look to join again on, I think it was January 24th, to review our findings, with the hope that everybody will be able to get their data to Bill and then to Scott in preparation for that meeting. Does that kind of do a good job of just like wrapping up what our plan is from this meeting and looking to the future? Have I missed anything?
No, that sounds good to me. Like I said, I have a coworker on Sherburne, and I did have some contact with Westboro in the past, so I can keep rolling with those, and I can take on a couple more as well.
Perfect.
So Laura, so as we were talking, I was jotting down a lot of things that we were talking about. And I know that, we obviously want to be asking these towns the same questions, right? Because that's how we're going to get our data. So like I said, as we were talking, I was writing down specific questions that we wanted to ask, or not, I think we need to agree on the questions that we need to ask. So is there, will you be sending out a list to us of what we should be asking? Do we want to rattle them off right now and come to an agreement that yes, that should be asked, no, and maybe somebody has some different ideas?
Let's definitely open that back up. I think from when we had started talking about this, I'll just run through what I have notes on. We were talking about looking at the composition of the other committees, staff compared to resident contributions. We had voting status of the committee, budget of the committee, responsibilities of the committee, town. If it is a charter or bylaw defined committee, we'll want to put that in the notes. What their meeting schedule is, if their meetings are recorded, what their meeting frequency is. Oh gosh, I'm going all over the place. And just, so those are the topics that we've discussed so far, but I would, if there's other ideas of, of topics that you'd like to make sure we research, please add them in.
Just a couple other ones that I whether or not they have a major highway going through their town.
Oh, yep, sorry.
The population, I think you mentioned, whether it's a public meeting, what type of data do they collect and where do they collect it from? I think you said composition, charge, and voting. I think you mentioned everything else that I had written down here.
Laura, did you mention budget?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
I don't know. Oh yeah.
What
Yeah.
else? Whether or not they had videos, and did we mention how the committee was actually created? Whether or not it was created by the selectmen or town voted?
Bylaw, exactly. I'll clarify that when I write that out. I wonder if we want to include distribution centers, if they've got a distribution center in their town. Is that something that we'd like
I was
to
thinking
include in our study?
schools. How many schools?
Those might be second tier, once you drill into the communities that have the composition, the charge that you're interested in, and the type, then maybe those you drill into school distribution centers. Are they a bedroom community, that type of thing.
Would it be worth asking, what is their status, if for as far as, complete streets projects or safe routes to school projects and stuff like that? Or is that kind of outside that realm?
It might be appropriate to think about that in the context of a permanent traffic safety committee. Once any future group starts diving into how to deal with those things here, and the same with warehouse distribution centers and school issues and everything else, is my sense is that doesn't necessarily impact the formation of and the rules for the charge for a permanent committee. But it can't hurt to gather that data, as you're speaking with whatever contact is that you're talking to for these towns, ask an open-ended question of how is it working? What would you do differently? What do you recommend? Things like that, and just put those into notes. And, we may end up, again, our charge is to form one, is figure out how it would look if we were to create one. But all of that data is going to likely be very useful in the next phase. That once it's created, distribution centers is an issue that we have here in Northborough. And we may want to then contact some of those others and steal some more ideas, whether we stole the ideas for how to form it from a particular community. If they have some distribution centers, they may have some guidance and things we can learn from them.
I think I'd be interested in the very beginning too, to know how often they meet.
Yeah, I agree. That's
And whether it works for them or not,
Mark, I think I saw you put your hand up too.
Yeah, I was wondering, are we limited to towns that have committees or something equivalent? Or can we just look at towns that seem to do traffic pretty well and look into how they handle it? It may not be a committee, it might just be internally. I mean, I'd like to know that and kind of quantify it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with that, because the point is to see if it's worth, having this committee put together. So both sides of the ball definitely are important.
Yeah, I could imagine there might be some communities that have staff specifically for this purpose. There might be a traffic safety engineer that works for a community, or something along those lines where, there's a full-time person dealing with it. So there isn't a need for a committee. I think any data we collect is useful.
Okay.
Yeah, Mark, we have one on the list. Hudson is a staff only internal traffic safety committee focused on vehicles and pedestrians.
Okay.
So there may be a few others on the list that I pulled together that I just randomly called towns and looked on their websites.
Yeah, I can imagine, I have to get to my house through Berlin, and I can't imagine they're big enough to have a committee, but they do pretty well. So I want to into them.
Berlin does have one, I think.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah. I reached out to them a while back, but I never had heard anything back.
I imagine that any community that does not have a formal committee for that purpose has staff working on it, because it's an important aspect of any community.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mitch. So just to bring these members up to speed, a concern gets emailed into DPW, PD, administration. It gets sent to myself from the other departments. Myself, the police chief, town engineer, and often the town planner get together. We review the concerns. The most appropriate department head takes the lead on it, does the research, drafts up a response, sends it to the other department heads. We review it, we vet it out through our areas of expertise, get it back to the contact person, and then send that out as a response to the citizen. If it's a unique response, something a unique concern that we haven't had before, then I'll post it on our traffic safety webpage. So that's generally the current process that occurs. The turnaround time is anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks if we have to reach out to CMRPC or Mass DOT for their input. If there's any concerns that a resident brings up about Route 20, we have to go to DOT. Kind of stretches out the response time. But generally, that's how things are handled currently without a committee.
Scott, do you have you collect data on the number and type of questions that you get and suggestions that you get and outcome?
We don't collect hard data. What'll happen is if somebody emails with a concern or a question about why can't I have a stop sign here, I will direct them to the web page that has that prior request with the answers, and I'll copy the answers into the body of the email. I don't repeat the same answer on the website over and over again, but I do reutilize those responses.
But you don't track data like, oh, we got, over a period of a month or a year, we have 13 requests for a stop sign at this intersection, or stop signs in general, or anything else.
No,
Okay.
we don't. I mean,
Okay.
they'll they'll pop up in clusters. You know, we
Yeah.
had a cluster at Hudson and Allen a couple weeks ago. It happens when you see something in the news or something, you know, unfortunate happens somewhere in town. There'll be cluster requests, either of that topic or locale.
Makes sense.
So is there any other topics or ideas that anybody would like to share as far as the type of data we're going to gather when we're researching these other towns? Again, this is going to be a living document. So if you identify things as you're going, make sure to just put a note at the bottom, just highlighting whatever the points are, and we'll be sure to discuss that at a future meeting. I don't think there was anything else on our agenda for today. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to make sure we covered today? Scott, is there any other feedback you'd like to have, you know, parting wisdom before we say so long?
No, I think this was a well-structured meeting, better than most committees that have never met before, better than some committees that meet often. So it was well done. I appreciate everyone's efforts in coming to the table, you know, pre-educated, we'll say.
Well, I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. I thank you for taking an interest in this and really being a part of a solution that's going to hopefully make the roads a little bit safer and take some of that weight off of town staff. You know, I think we've got some really great backgrounds that we're going to bring to the table, and I'm just looking forward to the solutions that we'll identify. So should I make a motion to adjourn?
No, somebody else needs
Do
to.
I do that?
You
Oh,
can request one.
Yes. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
thank you.
I'll second.
Do I?
Yeah,
And then
vote by
you say
roll
motion's
call.
been made and seconded, and then you do a roll call vote around.
A motion's been made and seconded to adjourn our meeting. Can we do a roll call vote? Bill Pierce,
Aye.
Mark McMenemy,
Aye.
Janine Callahan,
Aye.
Mitch Cohen,
Aye.
Jen Scalise,
Aye.
Krista Titus,
Aye.
and Scott Charpentier.
Yeah,
Scott is a voter in this.
Oh, okay.
so.
Thank you for
Okay.
asking. I'll abstain.
Thanks for all the help, you know, with today. And I'm Laura. I thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a great night and happy holidays.